A quick note before we get started. This is episode 3 of this series on legal sports betting in North Carolina. If you missed the first 2 episodes, you can get caught up anytime.
When we went to the floor, we had the votes. Within the last 48 hours, we talked to every member of the House. We had the votes, and it was going to pass by 1.
That's North Carolina lobbyist Chess McDowell, who represents many professional teams in the state. A bill to legalize mobile sports betting in North Carolina had passed the Senate months earlier. Now, in June 2022, it was the House of Representatives' turn. Supporters like McDowell and bill sponsor Jason Sain had spent months working towards this moment, changing provisions in the legislation, hoping to woo additional lawmakers. Opponents, too, had fought against it, bringing experts to discuss the drawbacks to more legalized gambling in the state. The fight would continue on the House floor. I'm Brian Murphy from WRAL News.
And I'm Tim Donnelly from 99.9 The Fan, and this is episode 3 of a brief history of Triangle Sports on legal sports gambling in North Carolina. In this episode, from the rare House vote where no one seems to know the outcome in advance, through a redoubling of efforts to pass the bill, and finally to a celebration of sports betting in Charlotte. Now let's pause right here for a Schoolhouse Rock-style review of how a bill becomes a law. I remember the song, I remember the cartoon, I don't exactly remember how it happens, and Brian, I know you can fill us in.
Sure, we'll use this bill as an example. You know, it was introduced in the Senate, so that means it had to go through the committee process in the Senate, it had to get a floor vote in the Senate, and then when they pass it, it comes over to the House for the same process. Has to get through committees. The House can change the bill. They can amend it, the bill that the Senate already passed. And so then they have to vote on the amendments and then the original bill.
How unusual is it to bring something to a vote that doesn't have guaranteed support that everybody knows about going in?
Especially in this day and age, most bills line up along party lines. You pretty much know who's on what team and how they're going to vote. It's very unusual for a bill to get to the House floor or the Senate floor and not know the outcome. There are vote counters, there are lobbyists, there's lots of people who get paid money to know how these votes are going to turn out. This case was very unusual. The divisions were not along party lines, and thus the outcome wasn't known at all. So that brings us to June 22nd, 2022. Supporters of legalized online gambling were in a strange position. They would need to pass 2 bills, not 1, to advance gambling through the North Carolina House of Representatives. First, the Senate bill as it came to them, along with another bill of House-required changes. Remember, they had to pass both.
When the first bill was up, there were several amendments proposed in the House. Some sailed through, including one that would limit the hours of operation for an in-person sports book around college events. It was a direct shot at PNC Arena in Raleigh, but was something supporters could live with. Another amendment allocated more tax revenue to smaller colleges in the UNC system. It passed easily.
But the fourth amendment, offered by Democrat John Autry of Mecklenburg County, would change the debate. Autry proposed stripping out college and amateur sports, largely defined as Olympic-style sports, from the bill. He referenced the demise of the Dixie Classic, the popular old holiday tournament that featured the Big Four basketball teams.
So we have a very storied and honored tradition of college sports in North Carolina. But there's been some dark spots along the way. There used to be a game between NC State and UNC called the Dixie Classic, and that was besmirched by a gambling scandal where some players were bribed to shave points. And whenever the point spread didn't end up like the gamblers, the fixers thought it should have, they challenged some of the NC State players after the game, and that was not a pretty scene.
We covered the Dixie Classic in episode 1.
My amendment seeks to remove betting on college sports. Remember that what we do here today could have a negative impact and add another black spot on our great college sports programs in North Carolina.
Some states, including Virginia, prohibit bets on in-state teams. But not being able to bet on NC State or Duke, UNC or East Carolina or any college football or college basketball, well, that got right to the heart of the matter in college sports crazed North Carolina. This amendment would strip out all college betting completely. Here's Representative Marcia Morey, the former Olympic swimmer, who we talked to in episode 1. She was against the bill.
It was a jaw dropper. John Autry, who sat in the back row, presented the amendment. And I think enough people saw, well, maybe we can have sports betting, but let's not do it on the college level. And so some people crossed over from their favoritism of sports betting to, yes, let's take out the NCAA. Well, that was a big part of how the industry was going to make money.
Representative Jason Sain had worked hard to craft a bill that would address enough issues to pass in the House and Senate. It was delicate work, and he didn't like John Autry's new amendment that prohibited college sports betting, or the fact that it was coming on the House floor.
I felt like it was an ambush, quite frankly, and didn't much appreciate it from my colleagues. Having gone through the committee process, I mean, we're normally not in that position on the House floor. Yes, people in opposition speak. Yes, they may offer a few amendments, but a lot of times, most of the time, the amendment process comes to the committee process. But because it was going to be such a close vote, and those who were opposed were being orchestrated by outside forces as well, wanting to defeat the bill, they really put a basically a hard press there on the House floor, and for me that was quite frustrating. Because as appropriations chairman, I get asked by a lot of my members, both Republican and Democrat, to help them do things in their district. And this bill was, very personal to me. And, when you've got people that you just most recently helped with projects in their district, getting them things that they wanted, and to have them kind of ambush you on the floor, that's a little tough to swallow.
Autry's amendment passed, and it wasn't particularly close. It passed 61-40. Betting on college sports was out. Completely. There was a buzz in the House chamber. What? Maybe this didn't have the votes. Maybe sports betting wasn't going to pass. Maybe Sain and supporters wouldn't even hold the vote. Without college sports, the revenue likely wasn't going to add up. But supporters weren't giving up. We'll be right back.
Chess McDowell, the lobbyist who had worked so hard to build consensus for legal sports betting, explains why proponents pushed forward even after college sports was stripped from the bill.
When you get to that point, you don't let perfect be the enemy of good. And we were losing some things on the floor that we knew we could deal with later. We knew that we could remake the case for why allowing betting on colleges or on college sports was important, and why that is a huge value to college sports, and why the NCAA does not prohibit it. But that argument didn't really pop up until it was on the House floor. And once it's on the House floor, we can't get to members. We can't explain it. I don't have a microphone. We're relying on folks that know to make the argument for us. It had been a long day. Folks were tired. Tempers were flaring. It was just a very complicated day. And at the end of it, when we had lost some big issues like hours of operation of the PNC, or betting on college sports, or requirements that were untenable for creating a good product, all those things, at the end of the day, we just needed something to pass.
Here's Representative Jason Sain.
Look, if you're going to vote against it, just vote against it. But they really tried to weaken the bill. Taking out the college sports, I thought, was a little bit underhanded, waited to the last as an ambush. But, that's the way it rolled. And I was getting texts from some of the lobbyists going, hey, look, if you want to pull the bill now, we understand it looks like it's getting to a difficult place. My point was, no, I'm not pulling it. We're going to get a hard vote on this so that we'll know who has been, quite frankly, lying to us. You'd get legislators who would say, oh, yeah, I'm fine with the bill. We're going to vote for it. And then we found out that some weren't exactly being truthful.
From his seat on the House floor, Sain could tell things were moving, and probably not in his direction.
I'm getting reports from outside the chamber. I'm getting reports from folks sitting in the gallery watching who's talking to who on the House floor. And there's a reason my seat is where it's at. From a seniority purpose, I could have a much higher seat than 13. I like sitting where I sit because I can generally see most of the body. And if you pay attention when we do have these close votes, or we do have something that's controversial, you can watch what members are talking to who and what's happening. And so I was seeing all that go on around me, getting intel. There were those who were lobbying for the bill, telling me things that were happening, who was talking to who, other members coming by my desk and telling me, hey, I think this person is flipping on you because they've talked to such and such. So I'm trying to chase it down, trying to talk to whoever was next that I became aware of, all while managing the debate on the House floor. So it was a very intense moment, just a really intense couple of hours. Trying to manage the internal conflict of wanting to quite frankly go bless some people out who had told you an hour before that they were with you, and now have somehow shifted in that short time frame. It was high drama.
The drama wasn't just limited to who was voting. It included who wasn't voting. House Speaker Tim Moore, a supporter, recused himself from any gambling-related legislation because of previous work he had done for the Catawba Indian Nation, which had a small temporary casino and in-person sports betting in Kings Mountain. Democrat Zach Hawkins, a top supporter of the bill, was out due to a family emergency. In all, the 120-member House had just over 100 voting members that day. Some members had simply taken a walk, which means they weren't in the chamber when it was time to vote.
Now came the actual vote on the bill itself. College sports betting had been stripped out of it. And it passed, 51-50. Maybe sports betting, even in its diminished form, would survive another day. Maybe, as McDowell said, at this point, you've just got to pass something. But remember, supporters still needed to pass one more bill, this one the original Senate version, to make sports betting a reality. And on that bill, opponents like Maury tried to change the bill to weaken it. This time, she wanted to strip out online betting altogether.
Probably one of the main concerns I had about the mobile sports betting. Just pulling out your phone from your pocket and having access basically to unlimited gambling opportunities. That is a concern. I am not opposed to like the casino gambling we have, the casinos with Cherokee on the Indian reservations. If it has to be extended to some of the professional arenas, I don't have big opposition if someone wants to go, walk in, pay, be deliberate about it. But just the phone aspect of it is what's really troublesome to me, the easy access to it.
But Maury's amendments didn't fly, and it seemed like Sane and supporters had the votes, barely, to finally get over the finish line. It seemed like it would pass, but guess what?
Not so fast. It did not pass. The bill failed by a single vote. Here's Chess McDowell again.
One legislator tells a funny story. When they called the vote and the vote happened, he said that he knew that it was going to fail. And I said, well, how did you know? He said, because one of my yes votes walked out the door. And we had it 61 to 59. That was, or whatever it was, because we didn't have the speaker. We didn't have, a couple folks weren't there, but whatever it was, we were going to win by one. Two people changed their vote without telling anyone at the last minute, and that flipped it the other way.
Members, is there further discussion or debate on the bill? Seeing none, the question before the House is the passage of the Senate Committee Substitute number 2 to Senate Bill 688 on its second reading. All those in favor will vote aye. All those opposed will vote no. The clerk will open the vote. Clerk will lock the machine and record the vote. 51 having voted in the negative and 50 in the affirmative. The Senate Committee Substitute number 2 to Senate Bill 688 fails its second reading.
The record shows it failed 52-49, but that's because House Majority Leader John Bell changed his vote after the bill's defeat to keep open the possibility of bringing the bill back again. Here's how WRAL News covered the vote.
Vote in favor of legalizing sports gambling changed their mind at the last minute.
But until you force the vote, you never really know what members are going to do. Now members get to go back to their districts and hear from their voters.
The bill had support on both sides of the aisle, but it also had stiff opposition from both conservative Republicans and liberal Democrats, like Pricey Harrison, who said legalizing sports gambling online would cause big social problems.
theft, embezzlement, job loss, poor health, suicide, bankruptcy rates, higher pressure on our prisons, potential corruption of athletes, throwing games. I just, like, you look at this, like, how can this even be a debate? How can we even think this is a good idea for our state?
But fellow Democrat Carla Cunningham supported sports gambling because it could have brought in tens of millions of dollars for the state. Some of it would have gone to HBCUs.
I believe we are already a gambling state. When we brought the lottery in, we became a gambling state. It's just a different type of gambling process in place.
Representative John Ager was planning to support the bill, but he ended up voting against it after listening to the debate.
We're done with it, and we're going to be done next week. And I think it's a dead issue.
WRAL's Laura Leslie has been covering the North Carolina state legislature for 2 decades.
We knew that this one, had a lot more backing from the leadership, right? So I really would have expected that if that bill showed up on the floor, that it would not have done so had there not been enough people that they were sure was going to vote to keep it alive. And so I can remember I was listening to it. I mean, the press corps room was, writing about it as it was going on, and you heard the vote total, and you could just hear the whole press corps go, "What?" It was like, wow, holy cow, because none of us expected that to happen.
Governor Roy Cooper served in the legislature for more than a decade. He served as majority leader, and he's been a longtime observer since leaving, first as Attorney General and now as a 2-term governor.
What you ended up with is a lot of legislators having excused absences. Some of those were walks. They just decided they didn't want to get involved in this. I think even the speaker did not actually vote. So you had a lot of last-minute arm twisting and arguments that were really a lot of push and pull. And so that wasn't all that surprising to me. It's kind of surprising when the leadership says, we got it and we're going to run this thing. It's rare that a defeat happens like that. But on an issue like this that's not partisan, it's not a party bill, and you really do have to have coalitions of people putting it together, particularly considering the passions and emotions around this issue.
Jim Perry, the chief sponsor on the Senate side, suspects that there was more happening behind the scenes that led to the failure in the House.
I'll say that I don't believe anything happens by coincidence in the General Assembly. And there are times that I think all of us are shocked by who is actually for something and who is actually against it. So, politics can create some strange bedfellows, and, you find out things afterwards about who publicly is for something, but trying to kill it behind the scenes. It's always interesting. A number of votes shifted on that thing. I think there was some home cooking involved, but that's inside baseball in the political world. I think it was probably more coordinated than people will ever understand.
You want to share who was leading that effort to kill it?
Well, if I knew 100% I was correct, I'd feel very comfortable. I can't really nail down all of the players involved, but I would think that there are times that those with gambling interest probably would prefer to not have additional people with gambling interest involved. Could that have been somebody who wanted a license in the future, didn't have one that day? Sure. Could have been existing ones wanting to control more of the market. I mean, I guess it's possible. A lot of different crazy angles in politics.
Republican Representative Jeffrey Elmore voted yes on the first bill, the amendments, and no on the second bill, the actual bill from the Senate itself, which was his plan going into the voting session and the lone difference in votes between the two bills. Fellow Republican Representative William Brisson voted no on both bills, though vote counters had him as a yes entering the vote. 5 Republicans were present but chose not to vote. Democrat John Ager planned to vote yes, but changed his mind.
From someone that's way more comfortable watching a game than covering political votes and legislature, this sounds like a mess. Is it fair to say this is not how votes typically go?
This is not typical at all. Usually vote counters know precisely how every member is going to cast their vote. But others were changing their votes both ways, according to Representative Jason Sain.
I had some that had said they would not vote for it, who ended up voting for it. So we changed their mind on the House floor, which also rarely happens. But then I had some who had told me that they were a definite yes, and then they flipped and voted no. You can't account for that. I like to take people at their word. If they tell you they're going to do something, I expect them to do that thing. Now, they'll find ways to explain what they did. I took note of it. As my seatmate would tell you, I kept that vote tally under the glass on my desk until we passed the bill in the following session as a reminder of who was with me and who was not with me. And I made a mental note of who had told me one thing and then did something else.
Sain was about to be even angrier. When a bill fails on the floor, particularly one backed by leaders in the majority, it will be immediately brought up for reconsideration and sent back to a committee. That keeps the bill alive for the session. And even if it has no chance of passing, it saves a bit of face for the sponsor. Not this time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to move that the bill be re-referred to Rules, Calendar, Operations of the House.
Members, Representative Bell is making a motion to reconsider and then a subsequent motion to move the bill to Rules. And so that the body knows the purpose of this is so that this bill can be sent back to Rules so that the members can continue to work on it and hopefully develop enough support at some point to bring it back. So that is the purpose of the motion. If the motion is granted, the chair intends to refer the bill to the Rules Committee. Further discussion or debate? The motion is before the body. All those in favor will signify by voting aye. All those opposed will vote no. Clerk will open the vote. Clerk will light the machine and record the vote. 59 having voted in the negative and 44 in the affirmative. The motion fails and the bill will continue to fail on second reading. Members, we've reached the end of our calendar.
When you're in the majority party, you never want one of your members to have their bill fail, even if it just gets sent back to committee, never to be heard again, is a lot different than it just being dead on the House floor. And as we said, the legislature, it's kind of like Night of the Living Dead. Bills are rarely ever gone for good. So the majority leader called for a vote, and as he would for any member of his caucus, and to reconsider and just to send it to committee. And when that vote failed, and I realized that some of my friends who I would hang with on any piece of legislation on a procedural matter for them, whether I agreed with it or not, I would at least give them the favor of the procedural vote, voted to kill the bill. And I felt betrayed by members of my caucus. I was very upset with them. Me being in leadership, me being an appropriations chairman, and what they want me to do as an appropriations chairman is find a way to get them to yes on most things that they're asking for. And they just told me not just a no, but a hell no on the House floor. And that didn't sit well. Luckily, that was toward the end of session and didn't have to hang around much after that. And quite frankly, for a couple of weeks, if you'd asked me if I was coming back to the legislature, I probably would have told you no way in hell.
Marcia Mori was ecstatic, but the Durham lawmaker was also realistic about how long her victory would likely stand.
No, I was thrilled. I mean, I'm against mobile sports betting. The casinos is a different issue. Go to Las Vegas and bet, that's fine. But when that vote came up and it was defeated, we were all stunned. And I think we knew it was not a permanent victory, but at least it was for another year.
Another year is exactly what North Carolina lawmakers needed. We'll be right back. Lawmakers sometimes take a while to wrap their heads around certain issues. They talk about an issue or a bill needing time to ripen, as if it were a piece of fruit. There was little doubt that mobile sports betting would be back before the legislature very soon. In between the failed vote in June of 2022 and the next legislative session in January 2023, there would be an election. About a quarter of lawmakers changed over. Since it was the start of a new legislative session, the sports betting bill had to start fresh. It would have to pass both chambers again, and the Senate insisted it begin in the House this time.
Representatives in favor of sports betting had something they didn't have before the previous vote: an actual list of who voted no. That gave them a concise list of which votes they needed to flip. Carolina Hurricanes president and general manager Don Waddell had met with lawmakers throughout the original process, explaining to them the benefits to Raleigh's NHL team of having sports betting in the state. Before lawmakers would consider the issue again, Waddell and the Hurricanes invited them to the PNC Arena for an event.
We held a summit here last year after it failed to explain what this means for the state. Because you had a lot of people that, if you didn't think gambling was happening in North Carolina, you live under a rock. If you want to gamble, there's ways to gamble, whether it's offshore, there's places, the old bookies still going on. And the state, two things, the state wasn't getting a single dollar from taxes from it, and they had no control over it. Now having the lottery oversee the gambling bill really puts it in a better place. It's going to be safer for everybody. Obviously, the people that were against it are worried about people overextending themselves. We'll make sure we have all the messages out there. But just because it's easier, if somebody was going to overextend themselves before, that's nothing new right now. Somebody that comes in for a basketball game or a hockey game and plays, a $20 bet, probably in pretty good shape to be able to make that wager.
By the time lawmakers returned to Raleigh in 2023, it was clear that some opposition had melted away. Perhaps it was personal efforts by the likes of Waddell and other sports leaders in the state. Perhaps, as some said, they'd become more educated about the issue in the interim. Perhaps it was the more widespread acceptance of sports betting in the nation. Or maybe it was the intense lobbying efforts and the money being spent in North Carolina to make it happen. Here's Representative Marcia Morey on the role and influence of lobbyists.
The lobbyists are paid by the industry to come in and meet one-on-one with individual senators or representatives to talk about the bill, talk about why it's so good. The lobbying was relentless. They had at one point, I think there was over 40 lobbyists roaming the halls, going into each office day after day, pushing this private industry to be legal in North Carolina. So, the pressure of the lobbyists. And then I think when it came down to the major venues and the professional teams, and in Charlotte, they wanted it, gambling at the venues, that kind of persuaded probably a lot of legislators in the urban areas. But it was going to happen. They poured so much money into this to get it passed. It was inevitable.
If last year's House vote was embarrassing for Jason Sain, this time he wasn't taking any chances.
I went to every member of my caucus personally and talked to them about it. And it was not going to leave it to a staffer asking. I wasn't going to leave it to a lobbyist telling me that, I spoke to this member and they said yes or no. I kept a digital tally sheet on my iPad, and I would literally tell members, I'd look them in the eye and say, look, I am taking a vote total here. I need you to tell me where you're at, and please be honest. Yes is fine. No is fine. Undecided is fine. I just need to know. And I'm asking you as a friend and as a colleague to at least afford me that. And I didn't look to go out after people who had told me one thing and did something else the year before. I just said, I need to know this year. I don't want to be embarrassed on the floor. And if I don't have support for the bill, then we're not going to bring it up. But I do intend to work it as hard as I can. And most appreciated that. It also gave me an opportunity to kind of gauge their level of understanding of what it would truly mean. Because sometimes in committee, even though it's a public forum and you're allowed to ask questions, a lot of times, like a classroom, sometimes kids just don't want to ask the question because they don't want to appear to be ignorant on something. And so in a more personal setting, people would ask more personal questions. So it started to build momentum. And, look, we also had a refresh and new folks had left the legislature that had been very opposed. New folks come in and replace them. And oftentimes they've not been scarred by lottery votes or things from earlier in their career. These are folks who are fresh. It's all fresh and new to them.
On the eve of the vote in the House, opponents kept up their objections to the bill, hoping to defeat it again, just like they had the year before. Here's how WRAL News reported the lead-up to the vote.
Mobile sports gambling in North Carolina could move a big step closer to being legal this week, but not everyone thinks it's a good bet for the state. WRAL sports investigative reporter Brian Murphy talked to those trying to stop the measure again.
We desert values for money. What a shame. What a darn shame.
That's Representative Abe Jones, a Raleigh Democrat and one of the lawmakers against a measure to legalize sports gambling in North Carolina. He and other opponents are warning that legalization could have disastrous consequences.
Crime, theft, embezzlement, job loss, in the home, divorce, child abuse, substance abuse, and even suicide.
States that have legalized sports gambling have seen an increase in problem gambling, and young men have been most impacted, says Les Burnell, the director of Stop Predatory Gambling, a DC-based group.
It's out of control because you're not a sports fan anymore unless you have money on the game.
Supporters of legalization point to betting that is already happening and the revenue North Carolina is losing to other states and offshore. Opponents say the amount of gambling will definitely increase.
It's inevitable that the more that gambling is legalized, the more that it's advertised, the more citizens are going to gamble.
A similar effort failed in the House by a single vote last year. Opponents are hopeful they can convince enough lawmakers to thwart this year's effort as well.
People understand what's at stake on this. I do think this bill can fail. And it should fail because it has no merit.
Momentum, however, was on the side of those wanting to see sports betting legalized across the state. And even those who'd been against it started to see where this was headed. Here's Jason Sain.
When the momentum changed and shifted and everyone kind of knew it was coming, it was interesting to me as the appropriations chairman, the number of calls from people who all of a sudden could support sports betting. One member, I won't out them, who I'd just seen weeks before on social media, claiming they would never, ever support sports betting. They didn't like gambling, called me the day that it was going to the House floor, that we were going to vote on it, and was literally using their vote to try to leverage something for their district. To which I told them, I said, look, I don't need your vote. I appreciate it. If you can see your way to vote for it, great. But it's not an item to be traded on. And I just don't operate that way. And I hung up the phone and just had a chuckle. They obviously felt the momentum. So when we got to the House floor, to your point, it was much different. I knew it was going to pass.
Unlike the previous year, a series of proposed amendments, 16 in all, were all shot down. On March 29, 2023, House Bill 347 passed 64-45. The bill, with some technical fixes, cleared the Senate 38-11 in early June. The House passed it again by a similar margin and sent it to Governor Cooper for his signature. Cooper signed the bill at Charlotte's Spectrum Center, home of the NBA's Charlotte Hornets.
Charlotte Hornets, thank you, people at Spectrum Center. Thank you for the opportunity to come and to sign this legislation here today. It's a great day for the state of North Carolina for sure. This is a historic moment for the state of North Carolina, and this will benefit our economy for generations to come.
It would still be 9 months before the first bets in North Carolina could be placed legally. In Episode 4, we'll break down what actually made it into the bill, who gets the money, what safeguards are being put in place to help those addicted, and how this debate will be remembered 5 years or 10 years from now. That's all in the final episode of this season of A Brief History of Triangle Sports. A Brief History of Triangle Sports is a production of Capital Broadcasting Company. Brian Murphy's extensive reporting is the basis of this season, along with reporting from other journalists at WRAL News and coverage from 99.9 The Fan. Graham Hill is our studio producer. Each episode is mixed by Doug Miller. Anita Normanley is our executive producer. Thanks for listening.